The alarm clock on the nightstand read 2:03 a.m. as I sat up in bed, startled by a loud noise coming from the basement. My heart was racing and my hands trembling as I tried to calm myself down. I glanced at my wife, who was still sleeping peacefully beside me, her chest rising and falling with each steady breath. I slowly got out of bed and tiptoed out of the room, making my way towards the basement door. The noise was growing louder and more persistent, like someone or something was trying to communicate with me. I could feel a cold sweat forming on my forehead as I reached for the doorknob. As I descended down the creaky wooden stairs, the noise grew more intense. It sounded like a low, guttural growl mixed with high-pitched whispers. My throat tightened and I could feel my body trembling with fear. I held on to the railing tightly, my knuckles turning white. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, I froze in shock. The basement was completely different from how I had left it before going to bed. The furniture was moved around, the boxes were open and their contents scattered all over the floor. But what caught my eye was a figure, standing in the far corner of the basement. Although the figure was backlit by the dim light, I could make out a familiar silhouette. It was my wife. I couldn't believe my eyes. I quickly turned on the basement lights and the figure disappeared. My heart was pounding in my chest as I tried to make sense of what was happening. Suddenly, the voice started again, more desperate and urgent this time. "David, you have to listen to me. Find me. Please." The voice was unmistakably that of my wife. But how was this possible? My wife was sleeping soundly in our bedroom upstairs. I couldn't wrap my head around the situation. Was I dreaming? Or was this some sort of twisted prank? Despite my fear, I started to move towards the corner where I saw her standing. As I got closer, I could see that there was a small door hidden behind some boxes. It was slightly ajar and I could feel a chill emanating from it. I pushed open the door and found myself in a dark and narrow hallway. The voice kept calling out to me, leading me through the winding hallway. My heart was racing and my whole body was shaking. I was afraid of what I might find at the end of this hallway. But I had to know. I had to find out what was happening. At the end of the hallway, I found myself in a small room, dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. In the corner of the room, there was a chair and a table with restraints. My heart sank as I realized that this was a torture chamber. And sitting on the chair, bound and gagged, was my wife. I rushed over to her and quickly untied her, tears streaming down my face. She was trembling and sobbing uncontrollably. When she saw me, she hugged me tightly, burying her face in my chest. "Oh David, thank goodness. You have to help me. He's coming back," she said between sobs. I held her tight and assured her that everything was going to be okay. I couldn't believe that I had found my wife alive and in such a terrible state. But as I looked around the room, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. On the table, there were a few sheets of paper with my handwriting on them. They were notes for a novel that I had been working on for the past few months. But there was something off about them. The handwriting was different, almost unrecognizable. And then I saw the date on the top of the page. It was from last night, the night when I heard the noise from the basement. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me as I realized what was happening. The voice I had been hearing, the figure I saw in the basement, it was all a manifestation of my own guilt and paranoia. I remembered everything now. The night when I had killed my wife and buried her in the basement. I had been suffering from writer's block for weeks, and the frustration and pressure to finish my novel had driven me to the brink of insanity. My wife had suggested that we go for a walk in the park to clear my head. But when we returned home, I saw that my basement door was open. I went down to investigate and found that my wife had accidentally knocked over a lamp, which had shattered on the floor. In my rage and frustration, I grabbed the lamp and swung it at her. She collapsed to the ground, blood pouring from her head. I panicked and dragged her body to the corner of the basement, where I buried her under a pile of boxes and furniture. But my mind was unable to wrap itself around the reality of what I had done, so it created an alternate reality, where my wife was still alive and desperately trying to communicate with me. But now, as I looked into her eyes, I could see the pain and fear that I had caused her. She had been living in this hell for weeks and I had been completely unaware. I held her close and begged for her forgiveness, but she just looked at me with sadness and pity. Suddenly, we heard the sound of footsteps coming down the hallway. My wife grabbed my hand and pulled me towards the back of the room. In the corner, there was a small hidden trapdoor leading to an underground tunnel. We quickly opened it and climbed down, shutting the trapdoor above us. We ran through the dark and damp tunnels, our hearts racing with fear. I could hear the sound of someone chasing us, their footsteps getting closer and closer. We ran until we came to a dead end. But then I realized that there was a small opening in the wall, leading to another room. We crawled through the opening and found ourselves in another small room, lit by a few candles. Inside, there were symbols and markings on the walls, like some sort of ritualistic shrine. But before I could fully process what was happening, I heard a voice behind us. "Well, well, well. Look who's back." I felt a cold chill run through my body as I turned around to face the source of the voice. And there, standing in front of me, was a figure that looked exactly like me. My doppelganger. "You killed me, David. You killed your own wife and buried her in the basement. And you're going to pay for that," the doppelganger said with an evil grin. I couldn't believe what I was seeing and hearing. How was this possible? Was this some sort of nightmare? But then, I remembered the notes on the table. My doppelganger had been using my own writing against me, manipulating my mind and creating this twisted reality. My wife and I stood there, frozen in terror as the doppelganger lunged towards us. I quickly grabbed a nearby candle and threw it towards him, setting him ablaze. He screamed in pain as the fire consumed him, disappearing in a cloud of smoke. But even as he vanished, I could still hear his voice whispering in my mind, taunting me and reminding me of what I had done. My wife and I collapsed on the ground, both shaking with fear and exhaustion. But at least we were alive and together. I couldn't believe that I had almost lost my wife, both in reality and in my own mind. The next morning, the police arrived and I confessed to everything. They searched the basement and found my wife's body, just where I had buried her. I was arrested and charged with the murder of my own wife. As I sit in my prison cell, haunted by my own memories and guilt, I can't help but wonder, was any of it real or was it all a figment of my imagination? But then I remember the pain and fear in my wife's eyes and I know that it was all too real. And I can only hope that one day, I will find some sort of redemption for the horrors that I have caused. But until then, I will continue to be tormented by the voice from my basement. The voice that will always remind me of the monster that I have become. In the depths of my subconscious, as slumber's embrace enveloped me, a recurring dream unfolded, painting a chilling tableau that lingered in my waking thoughts. I would find myself awakening abruptly, my senses heightened as I stumbled out of bed and made my way down the dimly lit stairs to the basement. With each step, my heart pounded in my chest, a foreboding sense of dread creeping over me. The basement was a sprawling labyrinth of shadows and secrets, a place I had always avoided in my waking hours. Yet in the ethereal realm of dreams, I was compelled to venture into its unknown depths. As I navigated through the labyrinthine corridors, the air grew heavy and stale, filled with an oppressive sense of age and decay. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like macabre tapestries, and the only source of illumination came from flickering fluorescent lights that cast eerie shadows across the walls. Suddenly, my gaze was drawn to a solitary room off to the side. A faint glimmer emanated from within, beckoning me closer. With trembling hands, I pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The room was small and cluttered, its walls adorned with peeling wallpaper and faded photographs. In the center of the room stood an old, wooden table, upon which lay a variety of strange and unsettling objects, vials filled with murky liquids, scalpels glinting in the dim light, and a collection of bizarre surgical instruments. But it was not the macabre contents of the room that sent shivers down my spine. It was the man. Sitting hunched over the table was an elderly man, his wizened face obscured by a surgical mask. He wore a white coat stained with crimson, and a peculiar contraption was fixed to his head, emitting a faint, blinking light. The man seemed oblivious to my presence, his gnarled hands deftly manipulating the surgical instruments as he worked on some unseen specimen. An air of madness clung to him, a disturbing intensity that made my heart pound in my chest. I watched in fascination and horror as the man continued his work, his movements precise and methodical. It was as if he were performing some arcane ritual, his every action imbued with a sinister purpose. Suddenly, the man's head snapped up, his eyes widening as they met mine. A look of recognition crossed his face, and a cruel smile spread across his thin lips. "Hello, my dear," he said, his voice a raspy whisper. "Welcome to my humble abode." Fear propelled me backward, my body slamming against the door as I struggled to escape. But the door was jammed, trapping me inside the room with the enigmatic old man. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice soothing yet menacing. "I am merely a doctor. I am here to help you." I shook my head, desperate to deny his words. But as I looked into his piercing eyes, I felt a strange compulsion, as if my will were slowly being drained away. "You need my help," he said. "You have been suffering, haven't you? Nightmares that haunt your waking hours, a sense of emptiness that you cannot shake. I can help you find peace." His words seemed to resonate deep within me, stirring a longing for release from the torment that had plagued me for so long. As if in a trance, I found myself walking toward him, my body moving of its own accord. He reached out a withered hand and gently caressed my cheek. "Trust me," he whispered. "I am here to help you." And with that, he raised a scalpel to my throat, its sharp edge glinting in the dim light. I awoke with a gasp, my body drenched in sweat. The dream had ended, but the terror lingered, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows of my subconscious. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that the dream held some deeper meaning. The strange old man, the crimson stains, the blinking light on his head, it all seemed so familiar, yet so elusive. I began to search for answers, delving into old books and obscure websites. I spoke to friends and family, but no one could provide any insights. It was as if the dream existed in a vacuum, its secrets locked away from my understanding. But even as I failed to unravel the mystery, the dream continued to haunt me. It would come unbidden, dragging me back to the basement room and the sinister presence of the old man. And each time I awoke, I felt a growing sense of dread, as if something terrible was about to happen. One evening, as I lay in bed trying to ward off the slumber that would inevitably bring the nightmare, I noticed a faint glow coming from beneath my dresser. Curiosity got the better of me, and I crawled forward to investigate. There, tucked away in a dusty box, I found an old photograph, yellowed with age. I picked it up and gasped as my eyes widened in recognition. It was a photograph of the old man from my dream. My heart pounded in my chest as a flood of memories came rushing back to me. I remembered a shadowy figure lurking in the darkness of my childhood home, a strange old man who would sometimes visit my room at night. I had always dismissed these memories as the figments of a child's imagination, but now I realized they were anything but. The old man from my dream was real, and he had been with me my entire life. A wave of fear and revulsion washed over me. I knew that the man was dangerous, that he had some sinister plan for me. But what it was, I did not know. I spent the rest of the night huddled in a corner of my room, too terrified to sleep. As the first rays of dawn broke, I knew I had to find a way to protect myself. I didn't know who to turn to. My parents would think I was crazy, and the police would never believe my far-fetched story. I was alone, trapped in a nightmare that was becoming all too real. Desperation propelled me to seek help from an unexpected source. I reached out to a friend who had always been interested in the paranormal, hoping that she might have some insights into my situation. My friend listened to my story with a mix of skepticism and concern. She didn't dismiss my experiences as mere hallucinations, but she also cautioned me to be careful. Together, we delved into the world of the supernatural, searching for answers to my haunting dream. We read books on exorcisms and protection spells, and we even visited a local medium in the hope of contacting the old man's spirit. But our efforts proved futile. The old man remained an enigma, his motives and abilities shrouded in mystery. As the weeks turned into months, the dream continued to torment me, each visit from the old man bringing me closer to the brink of madness. I became a shadow of my former self, haunted by fear and paranoia. I avoided being alone, constantly looking over my shoulder, expecting the old man to appear at any moment. My relationships suffered as I withdrew into myself, unable to confide in anyone about the horrors I was experiencing. I felt trapped, alone in my battle against an unseen enemy. But even in my darkest moments, a flicker of hope remained. I refused to believe that the old man had complete control over me. I knew that I had to find a way to fight back, to reclaim my life from the clutches of this nightmare. I began to research self-defense techniques, learning how to protect myself physically and mentally. I practiced meditation and visualization exercises, building up my inner strength and resilience. Slowly but surely, I began to regain a sense of control over my life. I confronted my fears head-on, exposing myself to the situations that triggered my nightmares. I refused to let the old man define me or control my destiny. And as I grew stronger, the nightmares became less frequent. The old man still visited me in my dreams, but his presence no longer held the same power over me. I was no longer a helpless victim, but a warrior fighting for my freedom. Eventually, the nightmares ceased altogether. The old man had vanished, leaving me with a newfound sense of peace and empowerment. I had faced my fears, confronted my demons, and emerged from the experience as a stronger and more resilient individual. The dream had been a test, a challenge that had forced me to confront my deepest fears and discover hidden reserves of strength within myself. It had been a journey into the depths of my subconscious, a battle for my sanity and my soul. And though the scars of the experience remained, I refused to let them define me. I had survived the nightmare, and I would continue to live my life to the fullest, free from the shadows of the past. I, along with my beloved girlfriend Nancy, had eagerly embarked on a new chapter in our lives as we moved into our dream home. Little did we know that this sanctuary would soon transform into a stage of unsettling and unexplained occurrences. The initial days were filled with the joy of settling into our new surroundings, arranging furniture, and making the house our own. However, as night fell, a sense of unease began to creep into our hearts. Nancy, usually the epitome of tranquility, confessed to me that an inexplicable fear had taken hold of her. Night after night, she lay awake in bed, her body rigid with tension, her ears straining to decipher the strange noises that emanated from the depths of our basement. It was as if an unseen presence was lurking in the shadows, its movements mimicking the sound of someone crawling stealthily through the darkness. At first, I dismissed her fears as the product of an overactive imagination. I tried to reassure her that it was just the old house settling or perhaps some nocturnal creature scurrying about. But as the nights turned into weeks, Nancy's accounts became more vivid, more insistent. She described how the noises seemed to grow louder, more purposeful, as if the unknown entity was drawing closer. One night, as the clock struck 3, Nancy's voice trembled as she shared a horrifying experience. She had been lying in bed, her eyes fixed on the dimly lit doorway of our bedroom. Suddenly, her gaze was drawn to a dark figure standing motionless in the shadows. It was tall, emaciated, its features obscured by the gloom. Terror surged through her veins as she realized that the figure was staring directly at her, its eyes gleaming with an unholy light. In a desperate attempt to break the paralyzing fear, Nancy uttered her own name. The figure responded with a guttural whisper, its voice sending shivers down her spine. It was a voice filled with ancient malice, a voice that seemed to echo from the abyss. It uttered her name again, this time with a chilling intonation that sent a wave of revulsion through her. Unable to bear the terror any longer, Nancy bolted out of bed and fled the room. She ran through the house, her heart pounding in her chest, seeking refuge in the sanctuary of my arms. I held her close, trying to comfort her, to assure her that it was just a nightmare, a figment of her fear. But deep down, even I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was amiss within our home. The following days were a blur of sleepless nights and anxious glances. We both felt an oppressive sense of dread hanging over us, a constant reminder of the horrors that lurked in the shadows. Nancy refused to sleep alone in our bedroom, and I found myself constantly scanning the darkness, my mind racing with every creak and groan of the old house. In a desperate attempt to quell our fears, we decided to consult a priest from the local church. Father Michael, a kindly old man with a gentle demeanor, listened intently to our account of the haunting. A look of deep concern etched itself onto his face as we spoke, and when we were finished, he suggested that we allow him to bless our home. With trepidation, we agreed. Father Michael arrived at our doorstep the following evening, armed with holy water, a crucifix, and a prayer book. He moved through the house, blessing each room in turn, his voice resonating with the power of ancient prayers. As he reached the basement, the atmosphere seemed to grow heavy, and the air filled with an oppressive sense of dread. Father Michael hesitated for a moment before cautiously descending the creaking wooden stairs. We followed close behind, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we entered the dimly lit basement, our eyes were drawn to a dark corner where an old rocking chair stood, its empty seat facing the wall. It was as if someone had been sitting there, watching us, just moments before. Father Michael approached the rocking chair, his hand trembling slightly as he reached out to touch it. As his fingers made contact with the cold, wooden surface, the chair began to rock violently back and forth. We gasped in horror, Nancy clinging to my arm for dear life. Father Michael quickly recited a powerful exorcism, his voice echoing through the basement as the chair continued to rock with increasing speed. Suddenly, the rocking stopped, and the room fell into an eerie silence. Father Michael turned to us, his face pale and drawn. "The presence is gone," he whispered. "But the house still bears the scars of its malevolence. You must be vigilant. The evil that once dwelled here may still linger in the shadows, waiting for an opportunity to strike again." With heavy hearts, we thanked Father Michael for his help. We knew that the haunting had left an indelible mark on our lives, but we were determined to reclaim our home from the clutches of darkness. We spent the following weeks cleansing the house of any lingering negative energy. We burned sage, played uplifting music, and filled the rooms with laughter and joy. Slowly but surely, the oppressive atmosphere began to dissipate, replaced by a sense of peace and tranquility. The strange noises in the basement ceased, and Nancy was finally able to sleep soundly through the night. The dark figure that had once haunted her dreams vanished into the realm of forgotten nightmares. But even though the haunting had ended, the memory of those terrifying nights remained etched in our minds, a constant reminder of the darkness that can sometimes lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. Today, we still live in the same house, but the horrors of the past have faded into distant echoes. Our home is now a sanctuary of love, laughter, and countless happy memories. And though we may never fully understand the events that transpired within its walls, we know that the power of love and resilience has triumphed over the forces of darkness. In the subterranean depths of my office building, where shadows danced and echoes reverberated through the concrete void, I found myself trapped, ensnared in a nightmare that defied all reason. It was the witching hour, 12:30 a.m., when my car stalled unceremoniously in the dimly lit parking basement. The hum of the engine faded into an eerie silence, leaving me stranded in the monstrous belly of the building. Fear gnawed at my senses as I stumbled out of my vehicle and into the cavernous expanse. The feeble glow of a few flickering fluorescent lights cast a sickly pallor over the rows of empty parking spaces, transforming them into grotesque specters that seemed to close in on me. The air hung heavy with a musty odor, tinged with the hint of something metallic and unsettling. As I ventured deeper into the basement, the lights flickered and died, plunging me into a suffocating darkness. Panic surged through me as my heart pounded like a drum in my chest. I groped my way forward, my hands trembling as they encountered cold, unforgiving concrete. The echoing sound of my own footsteps seemed to mock my solitude. Suddenly, I heard a faint scraping sound echoing from the far end of the basement. My body froze as my mind raced to conjure up the source. Images of rats or worse, something more sinister, flooded my thoughts. I strained my ears, but the sound had ceased. Summoning my courage, I took a tentative step in that direction. As I approached the end of the row, the sound resumed, louder this time. It was a rhythmic scratching, as if something was desperately trying to claw its way out of the concrete. Fear propelled me forward, and as I turned the corner, a gruesome sight met my eyes. Embedded in the wall, its eyes wide with terror, was a human hand. The fingers were bloodied and broken, and the skin was a sickly shade of green. I staggered backward in horror, my heart threatening to burst out of my chest. What had happened here? Who had suffered such a gruesome fate? As I stood transfixed in shock, the scratching sound intensified, now accompanied by a guttural moaning. Panic overwhelmed me, and I turned and ran, my feet slipping on the slick concrete floor. I stumbled and fell, scraping my hands and knees. Darkness enveloped me, and I thought I was done for. Suddenly, I felt a cold, clammy hand wrap around my ankle. I screamed and kicked, but my efforts were useless. The grip tightened, and I was dragged inexorably towards the end of the basement. I closed my eyes, expecting the worst. But then, just as suddenly, the hand released its hold, and I was thrown to the ground. I lay there gasping for breath, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed. Slowly, I stood up and limped towards the exit, my every step heavy with dread. As I emerged from the cursed basement, I felt a strange sense of detachment from the world around me. The familiar streets and buildings seemed alien and menacing. I walked in a daze, my thoughts consumed by the gruesome discovery I had made. I reported the incident to the police, but they dismissed it as a prank or a hallucination brought on by stress. Frustrated and shaken to my core, I knew I had to find out the truth behind the horrors I had experienced. I delved into the building's history, hoping to uncover some dark secret that could explain the events of that fateful night. I discovered that the basement had once been used as a morgue, and that it was said to be haunted by the spirits of the dead. Undeterred by the skepticism of others, I returned to the basement, armed with a flashlight and a camera. I was determined to prove that I hadn't imagined the horrors I had witnessed. As I descended into the darkness, I felt a wave of unease wash over me. The air was thick with tension, and the flicker of the flashlight seemed to dance with unseen presences. I walked slowly, my eyes scanning the concrete walls for any sign of the hand. I reached the spot where I had seen the gruesome sight, and my heart skipped a beat. Embedded in the wall was a fresh handprint, identical to the one I had seen before. I fumbled for my camera and snapped a picture, my hands trembling. As I turned to leave, I heard a soft moan behind me. I spun around, but there was nothing to be seen. The basement was empty, save for the echo of my own heartbeat. I left the basement that night with a heavy heart. I knew that I had been witness to something truly horrific, and that the horrors I had experienced would forever haunt my dreams. In the weeks that followed, I sought solace in the support of friends and family. I told them my story, but was met with disbelief and ridicule. Some accused me of making it up, while others suggested that I seek professional help. But I knew what I had seen, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the horrors of the parking basement were far from over. I was right. Not long after, a series of unexplained disappearances began in the building. People vanished without a trace, leaving behind no clues as to their whereabouts. Panic spread through the office like wildfire. Employees refused to work in the basement, and the building became a place of whispered fear and speculation. I knew that the horrors I had witnessed were somehow connected to the disappearances, but I didn't know how. Desperate for answers, I enlisted the help of a paranormal investigator named Dr. Emily Carter. She had a reputation for solving unexplained mysteries, and I believed that she might be able to help me make sense of the horrors that haunted my workplace. Dr. Carter conducted a thorough investigation of the basement, using a variety of scientific equipment. She confirmed the presence of unexplained electromagnetic activity and captured strange sounds on her audio recorders. She also interviewed the employees who had experienced the disappearances, and pieced together a chilling account of what was happening in the depths of the building. According to Dr. Carter, the basement was home to a malevolent entity that was feeding on the fear and despair of the people who worked there. The entity was responsible for the disappearances, dragging its victims into the darkness and leaving no trace behind. Armed with this knowledge, Dr. Carter devised a plan to confront the entity and free the building from its grip. She enlisted the help of a team of psychics and exorcists, and they prepared for a battle against an unseen enemy. On a cold, moonless night, they descended into the basement, armed with crucifixes, holy water, and a burning desire to vanquish the evil that lurked within. As they stepped into the darkness, the air grew heavy and oppressive. The flickering lights cast grotesque shadows on the concrete walls, and the air was thick with the scent of decay. The team made their way to the spot where the handprint had appeared, and there they encountered the entity face to face. It was a horrifying sight, a writhing mass of darkness that seemed to defy all laws of nature. The psychics and exorcists fought back with all their might, but their efforts seemed futile. The entity was too powerful, and it threatened to overwhelm them. Just when all hope seemed lost, I remembered the camera I had used to capture the handprint. I raced back to my office and retrieved it, my heart pounding with a mixture of fear and desperation. Returning to the basement, I found the entity engaged in a fierce battle with the team. I raised the camera and pointed it at the creature, its lens filled with the horrifying sight of its writhing form. I clicked the shutter, capturing the image of the entity on film. As soon as I took the picture, the entity let out a piercing scream and recoiled. The light from the flashlight seemed to burn it, and it had been weeks since I had brutally killed my wife in our basement. The guilt weighed heavy on my conscience, but what haunted me the most was the continuous voice of my wife that didn't let me sleep at night. It whispered in my ear, taunting me for what I had done. I tried to block it out, but it was relentless in its torment. I couldn't escape the memories of that fateful night. The sound of her screams echoed in my mind, haunting me wherever I went. I could still feel the coldness of the blade in my hand as I plunged it into her chest, over and over again. The blood that stained my hands served as a constant reminder of the atrocity I had committed. As the days passed, I found myself descending into madness. The voice of my wife grew louder and more insistent, driving me to the brink of insanity. I could no longer distinguish reality from illusion, trapped in a nightmare of my own making. I became a recluse, shutting myself off from the outside world in a feeble attempt to escape the relentless torment of the voice. But no matter how hard I tried to drown it out, it persisted, haunting me day and night. Finally, unable to bear the weight of my guilt any longer, I confessed to the authorities. The shock and horror on their faces mirrored my own as I recounted the gruesome details of my wife's murder. I was swiftly arrested and taken to a mental asylum, where I was deemed unfit to stand trial. Locked away in a padded cell, I was left to confront the demons that plagued my mind. The voice of my deceased wife continued to haunt me, a constant reminder of the heinous act I had committed. It whispered sweet nothings in my ear, its words dripping with malice and scorn. As days turned into weeks, I found solace in a different kind of madness. I began to embrace the voice, allowing it to envelop me in its dark embrace. It became my constant companion, a twisted confidant that egged me on to commit further atrocities. I lost all sense of time and reality, consumed by the malevolent presence that had taken root in my soul. The line between sanity and madness blurred, until I no longer knew where one began and the other ended. In my deranged state, I found a kind of twisted peace. The voice of my wife no longer tormented me, but instead guided me down a path of darkness and despair. I became a puppet, dancing to the tune of a malevolent force that sought to destroy me from within. As I sit here in my padded cell, I can still hear the voice of my deceased wife whispering in my ear. It is a constant reminder of the unforgivable sin I had committed, a reminder that will haunt me until the end of my days. As the rusted iron gates groaned open under the weight of our collective audacity, we stepped into the belly of a bygone era. The abandoned industrial complex loomed over us like a skeletal sentinel, its crumbling facade hinting at the secrets it held within. Our hearts pounded with a mixture of trepidation and exhilaration as we ventured into the unknown depths, armed with nothing but flashlights to pierce the oppressive darkness and an insatiable thirst for the macabre. The basement was a labyrinth of forsaken corridors, each echoing with the ghosts of a forgotten past. The air hung heavy with the musty scent of decay, punctuated by occasional whiffs of something far more sinister. As we cautiously made our way through the maze-like tunnels, our flashlights danced across graffiti-covered walls, revealing cryptic messages and eerie symbols scrawled by hands long gone. Suddenly, a noise echoed from the depths of the darkness. A guttural growl, low and menacing. Our hearts skipped a beat as we froze in our tracks, straining our ears to decipher its source. The growl intensified, reverberating through the concrete walls. It seemed to be emanating from somewhere below, pulling us inexorably towards its monstrous origin. With trembling hands, we descended a narrow staircase, its steps groaning under our weight. The air grew thicker and heavier as we plunged deeper into the abyss, the darkness enveloping us like a suffocating blanket. Our flashlights struggled to penetrate the gloom, casting feeble beams that danced and flickered across the uneven walls. At the bottom of the staircase, a heavy metal door stood partially ajar, inviting us into a realm of unspeakable horrors. A low, throbbing hum filled the air, accompanied by an acrid stench that burned our nostrils. With bated breath, we pushed open the creaking door and stepped inside. The sight that met our eyes defied all reason. The room was a grotesque laboratory, its walls lined with shattered beakers and twisted surgical instruments. In the center of the room, a massive steel table dominated the space, upon which lay a collection of monstrous creatures, their bodies twisted and deformed beyond recognition. As we cautiously approached the table, the hum in the air grew louder, transforming into a piercing shriek that tore through our eardrums. The creatures on the table stirred, their eyes opening wide to reveal glowing red irises. They let out a chorus of guttural roars, their voices echoing through the desolate chamber. Frozen in place by a combination of terror and morbid fascination, we watched as the creatures began to mutate before our very eyes. Their flesh rippled and twisted, their bones cracking and rearranging themselves, their forms contorting into nightmarish parodies of humanity. The stench in the room intensified, becoming almost unbearable, and our stomachs churned with a mix of nausea and dread. We realized with growing horror that these creatures were the result of a failed government experiment, a monstrous testament to the hubris of science. The facility had been abandoned, but the experiments had continued to lurk in the shadows, festering and evolving, waiting for the day they would break free. As the creatures continued to mutate, their roars grew louder and more menacing, their glowing eyes fixed upon us, and we knew that our time was running out. We turned and fled from the laboratory, our hearts pounding in our chests, the screams of the creatures echoing behind us. We ran through the labyrinthine corridors, our flashlights casting frantic beams across the walls. Behind us, we could hear the heavy footsteps of the creatures as they pursued us relentlessly. The darkness seemed to close in around us, suffocating us with its oppressive presence, and our breaths came in ragged gasps as we desperately searched for an escape. Finally, we stumbled upon an exit, a small, unmarked door that had been hidden by shadows. We burst through the door and into the relative safety of the abandoned complex's exterior. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a faint glow upon the desolate surroundings. As we stood there, panting and catching our breath, we looked back at the industrial complex that had held us captive. The horrors we had witnessed would forever be seared into our minds, a haunting reminder of the depths of human depravity. The failed government experiment had left behind a legacy of monstrous creatures, their screams still echoing in the wind, a chilling testament to the dangers of unchecked ambition. I, a recent university graduate, shared this living space with my once close friend, Kathy. Little did we know that our sanctuary would soon become a haunting labyrinth of unexplained occurrences, turning our nights into a symphony of fear. Kathy, always a believer in the unseen world, had often whispered tales of peculiar happenings within the building. Eerie sounds emanated from the seldom-used basement, disembodied voices echoed through empty corridors, and shadowy figures flitted past in the dimness. I, on the other hand, dismissed her claims as a product of her vivid imagination. But as days turned into nights and nights into an endless cycle of terror, I found myself questioning my skepticism. One night, as the city slumbered peacefully, a guttural whisper echoed from the depths of our apartment. Kathy's eyes widened in fear, her body trembling uncontrollably. The sound, low and menacing, seemed to penetrate our very souls. We exchanged terrified glances, our hearts pounding against our rib cages. Summoning a trembling courage, we ventured into the darkness of the basement. The cold, damp air sent shivers down our spines as we descended the creaking stairs. Cobwebs clung to the walls, casting intricate designs that danced with the flickering shadows. The musty smell of decay filled our senses, making every breath a suffocating reminder of the horrors that lurked below. Suddenly, a guttural growl echoed through the darkness. We froze, our bodies seized with terror. I could feel the blood draining from my face as my senses strained to decipher the source of the sound. There it was again, a deep, animalistic cry that came from the far end of the basement. With bated breath, we cautiously approached the source of the noise. In the dim glow of a single bulb, we saw a pair of glowing red eyes staring at us from the darkness. Fear propelled us backward, tripping and tumbling over each other in our desperate attempt to escape. As we frantically searched for the stairs, a cold hand brushed against my ankle. I screamed in horror, its icy touch sending a wave of terror through my veins. Kathy's cries mingled with mine, a cacophony of fear that shattered the eerie silence of the basement. With trembling hands, we finally found our way out of the cursed depths, the darkness seemingly pursuing us with relentless determination. We huddled together on the couch, our bodies shaking with fear, our minds reeling from the horrors we had just witnessed. Night after night, the strange occurrences persisted. Footsteps echoed through the empty apartment, doors creaked open on their own, and whispers filled the air, taunting us with unspoken threats. We slept with the lights on, terrified to succumb to the darkness that seemed to be closing in on us. One fateful evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a long shadow over our apartment, a piercing scream shattered the silence. It came from Kathy's room. I rushed in, my heart pounding in my chest, only to find her frozen in terror, her eyes fixed on the wall. There, in the dim light of a bedside lamp, a shadowy figure loomed over her, its glowing red eyes piercing through the darkness. It was the same creature we had encountered in the basement, but this time, its form was more distinct, more menacing. Its sharp claws scraped against the wall, creating a chilling soundtrack that sent shivers down my spine. With a terrified cry, Kathy lunged at the figure, but it simply vanished into the darkness, leaving behind an oppressive silence that was more terrifying than any physical presence. We were alone again, but the feeling of being watched, haunted, never left our minds. The constant fear and sleep deprivation took its toll on us both. Kathy's cheerful nature faded, replaced by a perpetual state of anxiety. I, once a confident and carefree individual, found myself succumbing to the weight of unseen horrors. The apartment that had once been our sanctuary had become a prison of fear, a reminder of the shadows that lurked just beyond our comprehension. One day, driven to the brink of despair, we decided to confront the horrors that plagued us. We gathered all our strength and resolved to venture back into the haunted basement. Armed with only a flashlight and a baseball bat, we descended into the darkness, our hearts pounding in our chests. As we approached the spot where we had last encountered the creature, a cold wave of fear washed over us. The darkness seemed to thicken, enveloping us like a suffocating blanket. The air was heavy with the smell of decay, and the sound of our own hearts racing in our ears. Suddenly, the flashlight beam caught a movement in the corner of our eyes. We turned, our bodies tense, ready to face whatever horrors awaited us. And there it was, the shadowy figure, its glowing red eyes burning through the darkness, its claws twitching menacingly. In that moment, time seemed to slow down as we stared into the eyes of our tormentor. Fear paralyzed our bodies, but a flicker of defiance burned within us. With a trembling hand, I raised the baseball bat and charged at the creature. As the bat made contact, there was a sickening thud that echoed through the basement's emptiness. The creature let out a deafening roar before it dissolved into nothingness, leaving behind only a faint sulphurous smell. Whether we had truly vanquished the entity that haunted our apartment, or merely driven it into hiding, we did not know. But that night, As we emerged from the depths of the basement, a sense of relief washed over us. The heavy weight of fear that had burdened us for so long seemed to dissipate, replaced by a faint flicker of hope. As the sun rose over the city, casting its golden rays upon our haunted apartment, we vowed to rebuild our lives, to reclaim the sanctuary that had been stolen from us. The horrors we had witnessed would forever be etched in our memories, but they would no longer define us. And so, we ventured out into the world, armed with a newfound resilience and a determination to face whatever challenges lay ahead. The apartment, once a place of terror, became a reminder of the darkness we had overcome, a testament to the unyielding human spirit that triumphs over even the most unimaginable fears. In the tenebrous recesses of my subliminal tapestry, I often found myself treading through a labyrinthine path that led me to a subterranean chamber, my basement. With each descent into this abyss, a sense of unease would seep into my consciousness, whispering tales of a sinister presence that dwelled within its depths. As I navigated through the labyrinthine corridors of my dream, a faint glimmer emanated from a distant corner, drawing me ever closer like a moth to a flame. With trepidation, I approached the source of the glow, my heart pounding in my chest like a captive bird. As I cautiously entered the dimly lit room, my nostrils were assailed by a pungent odor, a nauseating blend of decay and something inexplicably familiar. My eyes scanned the room, seeking to unravel the enigma that lay before me. Amidst the disarray of forgotten relics and dust-laden trinkets, my gaze fell upon a figure that sent shivers down my spine. Seated in a dilapidated armchair, an elderly man with a blank stare fixed upon the wall, his presence exuded an aura of unsettling stillness. Clad in a pristine white coat that bore crimson stains, the old man seemed to have become a permanent fixture within this macabre tableau. A peculiar contraption perched atop his head, emitting an incessant, rhythmic flash that cast an eerie glow upon his pallid face. With each passing moment, the dream grew more vivid, and the details of my surroundings became increasingly distinct. I noticed the strange symbols etched into the floor beneath the man's feet, their meaning lost to the depths of my subconscious. The room seemed to close in around me, suffocating me with its oppressive atmosphere. An unyielding curiosity compelled me to draw closer, to unravel the enigma of this enigmatic figure. As I approached the armchair, the old man's gaze shifted, his milky eyes briefly meeting mine. In that instant, a jolt of recognition coursed through my being, as if I had glimpsed a forgotten fragment of my own psyche. Fear and fascination intertwined within me as I realized that the man before me was a manifestation of my deepest fears and the hidden truths that I had long suppressed. He was the embodiment of my own mortality, the inescapable specter that lurked in the shadows of my consciousness. With trembling hands, I reached out to the old man, hoping to find solace or perhaps even redemption in his presence. But as my fingers brushed against his cold, lifeless skin, a wave of revulsion washed over me. The familiar stench that permeated the room suddenly intensified, revealing its true nature as the fetid odor of decay. Abruptly, the dream shattered, and I was thrust back into the harsh reality of my waking hours. The suffocating darkness and the presence of the old man lingered in my thoughts, casting a long shadow over my day. I couldn't shake the feeling that the dream was not merely a figment of my imagination, but a glimpse into the hidden recesses of my own psyche. From that day forward, I carried the memory of the dream with me, like a secret burden that I dared not share with anyone. The image of the old man in the basement became a constant reminder of my own mortality, a haunting specter that whispered to me from the depths of my subconscious. And so, the dream remained a mystery, an enigma that I could never fully comprehend. It was a constant companion, a reminder of the darkness that lurks within us all and the fragile nature of our existence. In the quietude of a crisp autumn evening, as golden leaves danced in the gentle breeze, casting long shadows across the cobblestone streets, I found myself drawn to the old Victorian mansion on the outskirts of town. Its weathered facade, adorned with intricate carvings and wrought iron balconies, hinted at a rich and storied past. Curiosity mingled with a sense of unease as I approached the imposing structure, its windows shuttered and shrouded in an eerie silence. Years ago, the mansion had belonged to my friend's grandfather, a reclusive old man rumored to have been haunted by a tragic past. Tales of ghostly apparitions and unexplained occurrences had circulated among the locals, casting an air of mystery over the once grand abode. While I had always dismissed such stories as mere folklore, a strange fascination propelled me towards the house, beckoning me to unravel its hidden secrets. As I made my way up the crumbling stone steps, the creaking of the old gate seemed to echo through the desolate garden. Overgrown bushes cast menacing shadows, and the air was heavy with the scent of decaying leaves. With each step, the oppressive silence seemed to intensify, enveloping me in a shroud of anticipation. Reaching the grand entrance, I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. The heavy wooden door groaned as I pushed it open, revealing a dimly lit hallway shrouded in shadows. Dust danced in the faint rays of moonlight that filtered through the stained glass windows, casting an ethereal glow upon the antique furnishings. As I cautiously explored the house, my senses were heightened, each creaking floorboard and rustling curtain sending shivers down my spine. The weight of history hung heavy in the air, pressing down on me with an almost palpable force. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes followed my every move. In the grand ballroom, where faded chandeliers once illuminated lavish parties, I noticed a strange disturbance in the corner of my eye. A flicker of movement, a momentary shadow that seemed to vanish as quickly as it appeared. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, but a nagging sense of dread refused to subside. As I continued my exploration, I couldn't resist the urge to venture into the basement. Darkness enveloped me as I descended the narrow, winding staircase, the musty scent of damp earth filling my nostrils. Cobwebs hung from the low ceiling, and the only sound was the steady drip of water from a leaky pipe. Summoning my courage, I ventured deeper into the depths of the basement. Suddenly, a cold shiver ran down my spine, and the hairs on my neck stood on end. In the dim light, I caught a glimpse of something moving in the shadows. It was a large, dark figure, shapeless and menacing, its presence sending a surge of terror through me. Frozen in fear, I stared at the figure as it slowly emerged from the darkness. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with an eerie intensity, piercing through the gloom like two beacons of malevolence. A sense of overwhelming dread washed over me, paralyzing me with terror. My body reacted on instinct, and I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing in the empty basement. I stumbled and fell, but I scrambled to my feet and raced towards the stairs. Glancing back over my shoulder, I saw that the figure was pursuing me, its movements unhurried but purposeful, like a predator stalking its prey. Terror propelled me up the stairs, my heart pounding like a drum in my chest. I burst into the main hallway and collapsed behind an armchair, panting heavily. My friends, who had been waiting anxiously for my return, rushed to my side, their faces etched with concern. Wordlessly, I pointed towards the stairs, my trembling finger indicating the presence of the figure. They followed my gaze and gasped in horror as they caught sight of the dark entity ascending the staircase with deliberate steps. Panic surged through the group as we realized the gravity of our situation. We scrambled to our feet and fled the house, running through the dark streets and not stopping until we reached the safety of our own homes. In the days that followed, the haunting memory of what I had witnessed refused to leave my mind. Nightmares plagued my sleep, and the image of the dark figure lingered in my thoughts, casting a shadow over my waking hours. I couldn't shake the feeling that the experience had changed me, that I had glimpsed into a realm of darkness that I was never meant to see. The old Victorian mansion remained a source of fascination and fear for years to come. Locals whispered tales of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena, further fueling the legend of the haunted house. But for me, the memory of that fateful night would forever be etched in my mind, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the shadows, just beyond our perception. In the desolate depths of my house lay the unfinished basement. It was a cavernous space, filled with untold secrets, and the faint scent of musty memories. It was a place that I seldom ventured into, a purgatory of forgotten belongings and abandoned dreams. On an ordinary evening, with the setting sun casting long rays through the high windows, I found myself compelled to delve into the basement's enigmatic depths. I had a task to complete, a mundane errand of sorting through old suitcases and travel bags, relics of forgotten journeys and distant lands. As I descended the creaky wooden stairs, a sense of unease washed over me. The basement was cold, its air heavy with the weight of time. Cobwebs hung like ghostly veils, swaying gently in the draft. With a trembling hand, I flicked on the bare bulb that hung forlornly from the ceiling. Its dim glow cast grotesque shadows on the dusty walls, transforming innocuous objects into menacing phantoms. I could hear the sound of my own heartbeat echoing through the hollow space, a metronome marking the passage of my time in this eerie realm. I made my way to the rear of the basement, where the suitcases were stacked in haphazard piles. As I began to sort through their contents, a creeping sense of dread permeated my being. I felt as though I was being watched, unseen eyes scrutinizing my every move. The sound of my own breathing grew louder, each inhalation and exhalation a harsh rasp in the silence. Just as I was about to give in to my paranoia, I heard it. A faint noise, a barely perceptible sound that sent shivers down my spine. It was the sound of a large zipper being opened or shut, a distinct zzz zip. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest like a frantic drum. I turned slowly, my eyes wide with terror, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. But there was nothing, just the unending expanse of shadows and the oppressive silence. Panic surged through me, a primal instinct driving me to flee. I dropped the suitcase I was holding and scrambled to my feet. As I turned to run, I caught a glimpse of something in the corner of my eye. It was a fleeting shadow, a movement so quick that I could barely register it. I didn't wait to see more. I tore upstairs like a terrified 5-year-old, my footsteps echoing through the empty house. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my bedroom, where I collapsed on my bed, gasping for breath. For hours, I lay there in the darkness, my mind racing, trying to make sense of what I had just experienced. I went over and over the events in my mind, searching for a rational explanation. But none came. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister had occurred in the basement, something that defied all logic and reason. As the night wore on, I began to hear strange noises coming from the basement. It was a faint scratching sound, as if something was clawing at the door. I tried to ignore it, to convince myself that it was just the wind or my imagination playing tricks on me. But the sound persisted, growing louder with each passing minute. Finally, I could bear it no longer. I got out of bed and slowly made my way back down the stairs. As I approached the basement door, I could see a thin sliver of light coming from underneath. I hesitated for a moment, my hand trembling as I reached for the handle. With a deep breath, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The basement was pitch black, the only light coming from the open doorway behind me. I could hear the scratching sound again, louder now, coming from the far end of the room. I took a step forward, my heart pounding in my chest. As I moved deeper into the darkness, I could see two glowing red eyes staring back at me. They were the eyes of a creature that belonged to the realm of nightmares. Terror seized me, and I turned to run. But it was too late. The creature lunged forward, its claws swiping at my face. I screamed and dodged its attack, but it was relentless. It pursued me, its guttural growls echoing through the basement. I stumbled and fell, and the creature was upon me. Its claws raked my back, sending searing pain coursing through my body. I cried out for help, but my voice was drowned out by the creature's deafening roars. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard a sound that filled me with both dread and a glimmer of hope. It was the sound of footsteps on the stairs. "Sarah," a voice called out. "Sarah, are you down there?" It was my sister, her voice filled with concern. I screamed again, louder this time, and the creature hesitated. It turned its head, its glowing eyes fixed on my sister. Seizing my chance, I scrambled to my feet and ran. I could hear the creature pursuing me, its footsteps heavy on the stairs behind me. But I didn't stop running. I ran for my life, and I didn't look back. I burst out of the basement and into the living room, where my sister stood frozen in shock. She caught me as I collapsed into her arms, my body trembling with fear and exhaustion. Together, we made our way outside and into the safety of the night. As we stood there, huddled close, I could still hear the scratching sound coming from the basement. But it was growing fainter, and eventually, it disappeared altogether. I never went back into that basement again. The memory of that night haunts me to this day, a chilling reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected of places. And as I lie in bed at night, I can still hear the sound of that zipper, a haunting echo of the horrors I experienced in the depths of my own home. In the hallowed confines of my in-laws' basement, where shadows danced upon dust and cobwebs wove intricate tapestries, lay a forgotten relic, a relic that would forever etch itself into the annals of my memory. It was a pool table, its slate bed slumbering silently beneath a thick layer of grime, its once vibrant cushions faded and torn. My wife, then my girlfriend, and I descended the creaking wooden stairs, our anticipation mingling with a sense of trepidation. The basement, a labyrinth of unused furniture and forgotten memories, enveloped us in a cold, musty embrace. As we reached the foot of the stairs, my gaze fell upon something that sent a shiver down my spine. 3 pool balls, glowing faintly in the dim light, were meandering aimlessly across the table's surface. Our hearts pounding in our chests, we cautiously approached the pool table. The balls continued their erratic dance, as if guided by an unseen hand. We exchanged nervous glances, our minds racing to make sense of the impossible. No one else was in the basement, and there was no logical explanation for the ball's inexplicable motion. Summoning our courage, we tentatively reached out to touch the balls. As my wife's fingertips brushed against the cold, smooth surface of the 8-ball, a jolt of electricity coursed through her body. She recoiled, a gasp escaping her parted lips. I looked at her, my own heart pounding, and saw the profound terror reflected in her eyes. We both realized that something truly extraordinary was happening. The pool balls were not merely rolling, they were communicating. Each subtle movement, each gentle collision, seemed to carry a hidden message, a cryptic language known only to the balls themselves. As we continued to observe them, I noticed that the balls were forming patterns, a series of intricate geometric shapes that seemed to shift and morph before our very eyes. It was as if the balls were trying to convey something to us, to share some ancient wisdom or forgotten secret. My mind raced, trying to decipher the meaning behind the balls' movements. Was this some form of otherworldly communication? A message from beyond the veil? Or was it merely a random, inexplicable occurrence? Time seemed to stand still as we watched the balls dance in the dim light. Questions swirled through our minds, unanswered and unanswerable. What did the patterns mean? Who or what was behind the ball's movement? And what did it all have to do with us? As the minutes turned into hours, we found ourselves drawn into the ball's hypnotic dance. We lost track of the outside world, becoming entranced by their enigmatic movements. It was as if the pool table had become a portal to another dimension, a realm where the laws of physics and logic held no sway. Suddenly, the balls stopped moving. They lay still on the table, as if exhausted from their nocturnal revelry. We looked at each other, our minds still reeling from the extraordinary experience we had just witnessed. We never fully understood the meaning behind that night, nor did we ever discover the source of the ball's inexplicable movement. But the memory of that encounter has stayed with us, a haunting reminder of the mysteries that lie just beyond our grasp. And so, the pool table in my in-laws' basement remains a silent witness to that singular night, a testament to the strange and inexplicable occurrences that can sometimes pierce the veil of reality. In the labyrinth and underbelly of a time-worn hospital in Mexico, where the relentless march of progress seemed to have relinquished its grasp, I embarked on an uncanny encounter that would forever etch itself into the annals of my memory. My sojourn at this medical institution was part of my academic obligation as a computer science student. As fate would have it, our assignments often relegated us to the mundane tasks that the regular workforce deemed too trivial or irksome: cleaning computers, troubleshooting internet connections, the menial chores that kept the wheels of the hospital's technological infrastructure turning. On a seemingly unremarkable day, the hospital manager, A portly man with a perpetual crease of worry etched across his brow summoned us to the basement. His task for us was both straightforward and daunting: replace the aging Ethernet cables that snaked through the bowels of the hospital, ensuring the smooth flow of data and communication. Accompanied by 2 fellow students, I descended into the depths of the basement. Ladders in hand, we navigated the dimly lit corridors, their concrete walls adorned with decades-old graffiti and electrical conduits that resembled a haphazard spiderweb. Although well-maintained and spotlessly clean, the basement exuded an aura of forgotten time, as if it had been left untouched since the hospital's inception. We divided the task among ourselves, each taking a different hallway to expedite the process. As I worked diligently, the rhythmic clatter of my screwdriver against metal echoed through the desolate basement. Time seemed to slip away as I focused on the repetitive task, lost in the monotonous cadence of my own labor. Abruptly, my reverie was shattered by a chilling sound. It was a man's voice, hoarse and desperate, pleading for help. My heart skipped a beat as a surge of adrenaline coursed through my veins. Had I stumbled upon an accident? I frantically scanned my surroundings, but there was no sign of anyone in distress. I called out, "Hola? Hey Alguinahi," but my voice was met with an eerie silence. I checked with my fellow students, only to be met with puzzled expressions. They had heard nothing. A cold shiver ran down my spine as a profound sense of unease washed over me. Had I imagined the voice? Or was there something more sinister lurking in the shadows? As we continued our work, the unsettling feeling lingered, casting a pall over the once mundane task. My mind raced, conjuring up images of forgotten patients, lost souls trapped in the forgotten depths of the hospital. Just when the tension had reached a fever pitch, one of the students came rushing towards me, his face a mask of terror. "Did you hear that?" he exclaimed, his voice trembling. "Someone's calling for help." I had heard nothing, but his reaction was enough to convince me that I was not alone in my experience. As we cautiously approached the source of the sound, our hearts pounding in our chests, we found nothing. The basement remained silent and empty. We finished the job as quickly as we could, our minds preoccupied with the unsettling events that had transpired. As we reported back to the manager, recounting our encounter, he listened with a bemused expression. "Ah, you've met the basement ghost," he said casually, as if he were discussing the weather. "He's been around for as long as anyone can remember. Don't worry, he's harmless." His words did little to assuage our unease. We had never believed in ghosts before, but the inexplicable events we had witnessed had shaken us to our core. Over the following weeks, we returned to the basement several times to complete our cable replacement task. Each time, the ghost remained elusive, his presence manifesting only through fleeting whispers and the prickling sensation of unseen eyes upon us. As the days turned into weeks, the whispers of the basement ghosts became a part of our hospital lore. Some of our fellow students dismissed it as mere superstition, but for those of us who had heard the desperate cries for help, the legend of the basement ghost served as a chilling reminder of the hidden depths and unexplained mysteries that lurked beneath the surface of our everyday reality. In the end, whether the basement ghost was a figment of our collective imagination or a genuine supernatural entity, the experience had a profound impact on us. It taught us that even in the most mundane and seemingly innocuous of places, the veil between the world we see and the unseen world is often thinner than we think. I found myself on a dreary October afternoon, summoned to undertake the daunting task of cleaning out a hoarder's house. As I stepped across the threshold, a musty odor assailed my nostrils, a pungent blend of decay and something vaguely animalistic. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like ghostly veils, and the air was thick with dust and forgotten memories. With each step I took deeper into the house, the atmosphere grew heavier, pressing down on me like an invisible weight. The living room was a chaotic tapestry of abandoned belongings. Stacks of newspapers, yellowed and brittle, rose precariously from the floor, obscuring furniture beneath their weight. Clothes, once vibrant, now hung limp and lifeless from makeshift hangers, their colors faded by time and neglect. As I ventured further into the house, the stench intensified. The kitchen was a breeding ground for filth, with dirty dishes piled high in the sink and rotting food scattered across the counters. The refrigerator, its door ajar, emitted a foul odor that permeated the entire house. Undeterred, I continued my grim task, descending into the basement, a realm of darkness that sent shivers down my spine. The narrow, cobblestone steps creaked beneath my feet as I made my way down, the only illumination coming from a flickering bulb that cast eerie shadows on the surrounding walls. As I reached the bottom of the stairs, the full horror of the basement unfolded before me. It looked like an insane asylum that a serial killer had moved into. Animal skins, some bearing disturbingly human-like claw marks, hung from the ceiling, their glassy eyes staring down at me. Old-style sewing machines, their needles still threaded, stood in disarray, as if a macabre tapestry was being crafted in the shadows. Newspapers covered up the windows, creating an oppressive darkness that was only broken by the faint glow of the bulb overhead. Closer inspection revealed that the clippings were all related to a single individual, a local woman who had disappeared several years ago. The articles hinted at a sinister fate, her image now gazing up at me from the yellowed pages with a haunted expression. Glass jars, their contents obscured by a thick, viscous liquid, lined the shelves that lined the walls. Curiosity got the better of me, and I cautiously picked up one of the jars, holding it up to the dim light. A wave of nausea swept over me as I realized what I was looking at. The jar contained the severed hand of a human being, its fingers curled in a grotesque parody of a plea for help. Stacks of wet mattresses, their springs rusted and broken, lay scattered across the floor, each one a potential hiding place for unspeakable horrors. Old-style bed frames, their ornate carvings now tarnished and covered in grime, stood as silent witnesses to the depravity that had taken place within these walls. Rats scurried across the floor, their beady eyes glinting in the darkness. Mold spread across the walls in thick, black patches, its musty odor mingling with the other horrors that lurked in the basement. It was clear that this place had been a scene of unimaginable violence and suffering. Overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of the task before me, I staggered backwards, my mind reeling from the horrors I had witnessed. I knew I could not continue, not without risking my own sanity. As I stumbled back up the stairs and out of the house, I felt a profound sense of unease. The secrets of that basement would forever haunt my dreams, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. In the days that followed, I reported my findings to the authorities, but the investigation that ensued uncovered little new information. The missing woman's case remained unsolved, and the secrets of the hoarder's house remained locked away in the darkness, a chilling testament to the evil that can dwell among us. And so, the house stands empty, a silent sentinel to a forgotten tragedy. But for me, the memories of that cursed day linger on, a haunting reminder of the darkness that can lurk in the most unexpected of places. In the labyrinthine depths of our family friend's finished basement, there existed a room that haunted my childhood memories. Behind an ornate mahogany door, it lay concealed, a sanctuary for ancient Chinese artifacts, relics whispered to have witnessed the passage of millennia. My young heart skipped a beat as I crossed the threshold, a chill enveloping me like a suffocating blanket. The room was bathed in a dim, ethereal glow, cast by flickering lanterns that danced with age. To the untrained eye, it might have resembled a museum, with its display cases filled with a myriad of treasures, jade figurines, intricately carved ivory, and gleaming bronzeware. Yet, amidst the silent beauty, there lurked an undercurrent of something sinister. The air was heavy with a musty scent, as if time itself had seeped into the very walls. Shadows seemed to cling to the corners, writhing and whispering untold secrets. A peculiar sensation crept upon me, as if I were being watched. Not from afar, but close by, a presence hovering just beyond my peripheral vision. With each step I took, I felt an inexplicable urge to turn around, to confront whatever lurked in the darkness. As my gaze swept across the room, I caught a glimpse of something moving out of the corner of my eye. A flicker of movement, a fleeting silhouette that disappeared as quickly as it had appeared. I dismissed it as a trick of my imagination, but doubt gnawed at my mind. Chapter 2: The King's Burial Shroud. The centerpiece of the room, and the family's most prized possession, was said to be a gold burial shroud from a long-forgotten king or emperor. Legend had it that it imbued its surroundings with a strange and unsettling energy. The shroud was encased in a glass display case, its golden fabric adorned with intricate designs and glistening with an otherworldly luster. As I approached it, the chill in the room intensified, sending shivers down my spine. I leaned closer, captivated by its beauty, but also by a sense of unease. The eyes of the king, depicted on the shroud, seemed to follow me, their gaze piercing and judgmental. A whisper seemed to echo in the depths of my mind, a warning to stay away. Chapter 3: Shadows in the Dark. As my fascination with the burial shroud grew, so did my paranoia. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that something sinister lurked in the shadows, waiting for me to make a false move. One evening, as I sat alone in the basement room, my heart pounding with fear, I saw it again. A shadowy figure standing in the doorway, its form obscured by darkness. I froze, unable to breathe, my mind racing with terror. The figure remained perfectly still, its presence an oppressive weight upon my soul. I wanted to scream, to run for my life, but my body betrayed me. I was paralyzed with fear. Slowly, the figure began to move towards me, its steps silent as a whisper. As it approached, I could feel its cold, dead breath upon my skin. Panic surged through me, and I let out a desperate cry for help. Chapter 4: The Shadow King. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died, plunging the room into complete darkness. In the suffocating blackness, I heard a deep, guttural voice whisper my name. A voice that chilled me to the bone. "You have disturbed my slumber," the voice hissed. "Now you must pay the price." A cold hand reached out from the shadows, its icy grip tightening around my throat. I struggled to breathe, my vision blurring. As my life began to fade away, I realized the true nature of the shadow figure. It was the king depicted on the burial shroud. The king's burial shroud had come to life, its spirit unleashed upon the world. And now, it sought revenge for my intrusion. Chapter 5: The Escape. Through the haze of my dimming consciousness, I recalled a story I had once heard about a way to appease a restless spirit, to offer it something in return for its release. Desperation fueled me. I promised the king a gift, something he had long desired. I promised to give him the one thing that belonged to him, the burial shroud. To my astonishment, the grip around my throat loosened. The king's voice echoed through the darkness, his tone no longer filled with anger but with a sense of satisfaction. "You have made a wise choice," he whispered. "Now go. Leave this place forever." With a newfound strength, I stumbled towards the door, my heart pounding in my chest. As I fled the basement room, I could hear the king's laughter echoing behind me, a haunting reminder of the encounter I would never forget. Epilogue: The Legacy of the Shadow King. I never returned to the basement room of shadows. The memory of that night remained forever etched in my mind, a chilling testament to the power of ancient curses. The family friends, oblivious to the events that had transpired, continued to display their collection of artifacts, unaware of the sinister secret that lurked beneath their very feet. And the golden burial shroud, once a symbol of power and royal lineage, became a legend whispered among children, a tale of a restless spirit, and the price one must pay for disturbing its eternal slumber. In the quaint suburban home where I spent my tender years, nestled a mysterious and enigmatic space, the sprawling basement. Its vast expanse was divided into two distinct sections, one spacious and inviting, the other shrouded in darkness, beckoning me with an eerie intrigue. The larger section of the basement, well lit and adorned with a myriad of toys and forgotten treasures, held no fear for me. I would spend countless hours lost in imaginative play amidst its comforting familiarity. However, the smaller section, bereft of any illumination, presented an unsettling contrast. At the far end of this shadowy void, a large, enigmatic mirror stood sentinel like a forgotten guardian. Its heavy frame and expansive surface reflected only my faint and distorted image, casting an eerie glow upon the surrounding darkness. As a child of mere 6 years, the mirror filled me with a nameless dread, its secretive depths whispering unspoken horrors. My parents, aware of my trepidation, never considered removing the mirror. It had seemingly been left behind by the previous occupants, and its presence seemed to have become an unspoken part of the house's enigmatic character. With every encounter, I would brace myself, my heart pounding in my chest as I stumbled through the darkness, my gaze fixed on my trembling reflection. As I grew older, my fear of the mirror gradually subsided, replaced by a growing fascination. I would often find myself drawn to its depths, gazing into my own eyes, searching for answers to questions I could not articulate. The mirror seemed to hold a strange power over me, whispering secrets that only I could hear. One fateful night, as the moon cast an ethereal glow upon the sleeping town, my curiosity got the better of me. I crept into the basement, my heart pounding with anticipation and trepidation. The darkness enveloped me like a suffocating blanket, the only sound breaking the silence the faint creak of the old wooden stairs behind me. With hesitant steps, I approached the mirror, my breath coming in ragged gasps. As I drew closer, my reflection seemed to take on a life of its own, its eyes burning with an intensity that sent shivers down my spine. I felt a strange compulsion to reach out and touch the cool, glassy surface, as if by doing so I would unlock some hidden truth. As my fingertips brushed against the mirror, a surge of energy coursed through my body, numbing my senses. My vision blurred, and the familiar surroundings of the basement melted away, replaced by an ethereal landscape that stretched out before me. I found myself standing on a desolate plain, bathed in an otherworldly light. The sky above was a swirling vortex of colors, constantly shifting and changing. Strange and wonderful creatures, unlike anything I had ever seen before, roamed the barren wasteland, their forms and movements defying all known laws of nature. Time seemed to lose all meaning as I wandered through this alien world, encountering beings that spoke in tongues I could not understand yet somehow grasped their intent. I saw visions of a distant past and a possible future, glimpses of humanity's triumphs and follies reflected in the ever-changing landscape. Hours turned into days, and days turned into weeks as I explored the depths of this strange and enigmatic realm. The boundaries between reality and fantasy blurred, and I found myself questioning the very nature of my existence. Was I truly here, or was I merely a figment of my own imagination? As the time came for me to return, I stood once more before the mirror, my heart heavy with both trepidation and longing. I had witnessed wonders and experienced things beyond the comprehension of ordinary mortals. But I also knew that my place was in the world I had left behind. With newfound determination, I reached out and touched the mirror's surface once more. The energy that had once coursed through my body returned, and I felt myself being pulled back into the familiar darkness of the basement. As my senses returned to me, I found myself standing before the mirror, my body trembling. The surreal visions of the other realms still lingered in my mind, but the stark reality of my surroundings brought me back to the present. From that day forward, the mirror held a special significance for me. It became a portal to a world that existed beyond the confines of my physical senses, a place where anything was possible, and the boundaries of reality were fluid. I never spoke of my experience to anyone, choosing instead to keep the secret of the mirror close to my heart. As the years passed, the memory of that extraordinary journey faded, becoming a cherished part of my childhood that I would often revisit in my dreams. The old house with its enigmatic basement was eventually sold, and the mirror disappeared into the annals of history. But the lessons I had learned and the experiences I had witnessed within its depths remained with me, shaping the person I would become. And so, the story of the mirror in the basement became a tale whispered in hushed tones, a legend passed down through generations of children who dared to explore the darkness that dwelled beneath their feet. For within that darkness lay a hidden world, waiting to be discovered by those who possessed the courage to look beyond the realm of the ordinary. In the quaint suburban home nestled amidst manicured lawns and towering oak trees, the childhood memories of Billy unfolded like a vibrant tapestry. Amidst the laughter and playful adventures, there lay an incident that remained etched in his memory, an encounter that would forever alter his understanding of both fear and resilience. It was a balmy summer evening when Billy's ears were pierced by a spine-chilling scream that echoed through the house. The source of the commotion, the basement, sent his heart pounding in his chest. His mind raced, conjuring up images of sinister threats lurking in the depths of his home. Trembling with apprehension, Billy cautiously approached the basement door, his small hand hovering over the rusty metal handle. As he hesitated on the threshold, his thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of terror and curiosity. With a deep breath, he summoned his courage and pushed the door open. A musty odor hung heavy in the air, mingling with the faint scent of damp earth. A solitary bulb cast an eerie glow upon the dimly lit space, its flickering light casting long, distorted shadows that danced upon the walls. Billy's eyes scanned the surroundings, searching for the source of the unsettling sound. Suddenly, his gaze fell upon a pair of glowing orbs staring back at him from beneath a workbench. A surge of adrenaline coursed through his veins as he realized he was not alone. A raccoon, its eyes wide with fear, huddled in the shadows, its sharp teeth bared in a silent snarl. Billy's heart skipped a beat as he stood frozen in place, his mind struggling to process the surreal sight before him. His fear momentarily paralyzed him, leaving him a helpless spectator to the creature's agitated movements. The animal, sensing his presence, hissed and clawed at the workbench, desperate to escape its confinement. As the raccoon's panic intensified, so did Billy's own. The basement seemed to close in around him, the shadows taking on a menacing presence. His screams for help echoed through the emptiness, but they were met with only silence. In that moment of desperation, Billy's survival instinct kicked in. Summoning every ounce of courage within him, he grabbed a nearby broom and charged towards the creature. The raccoon, startled by his sudden movement, retreated further into the shadows. A fierce battle of wills ensued, with Billy brandishing the broom like a sword and the raccoon defending itself with its sharp claws and teeth. The basement erupted into a chaotic symphony of crashing objects and desperate cries. Billy's fear fueled his determination, driving him to overcome his terror and protect his home. With a final, powerful blow, Billy dislodged the raccoon from its hiding spot. The animal, squealing in fear, scrambled towards the nearest exit. Billy, his heart still pounding in his chest, chased after it, determined to make sure the intruder was gone for good. As the raccoon disappeared into the darkness of the backyard, Billy collapsed on the floor, exhausted and exhilarated. He had faced his fears and emerged victorious, proving to himself that he was braver than he ever thought possible. From that day forward, the memory of the raccoon in the basement served as a reminder of his own resilience and the power of facing his fears head-on. The incident instilled in him a newfound confidence, a belief that he could overcome any challenge that came his way. As the years passed, Billy carried the story of the raccoon with him, sharing it with friends and family as a testament to the indomitable spirit that lies within us all. The basement, once a place of terror, became a symbol of his triumph over adversity, a reminder that even in the face of darkness, the light of courage will always prevail. And so, in the annals of Billy's childhood, the tale of the raccoon remained an enduring legacy, a testament to the power of the human spirit and the transformative nature of fear. For it was in the depths of his terror that Billy discovered his true strength and emerged as a valiant hero, forever etched in the tapestry of his own personal history. In the heart of a quaint, enigmatic town, nestled amidst towering trees and verdant lawns, stood an ancient abode that had witnessed the passage of time and the ebb and flow of countless lives. Its walls, weathered by the relentless touch of centuries, whispered tales of forgotten occupants and secrets veiled in the mists of bygone eras. Drawn by a profound sense of history and an inexplicable allure, I found myself the custodian of this extraordinary dwelling, a place where the boundaries between the tangible and the ethereal seemed to blur. The former owner, a venerable nonagenarian named Mr. Hawthorne, had breathed his last within the confines of these hallowed halls. His frail body, once vibrant with life, had returned to the dust from whence it came, leaving behind a legacy etched into every nook and cranny of the house. Frail and forgetful in his twilight years, Mr. Hawthorne's presence lingered like an ephemeral echo, a testament to a life fully lived. In his absence, the house stood as a silent repository of memories, a vessel brimming with untold stories. The house was a labyrinth of hidden chambers and forgotten spaces, each revealing a facet of its rich tapestry. Dust motes danced in the dim sunlight that filtered through grimy windows, casting an ethereal glow upon the disarray that had accumulated over decades. Cobwebs hung like delicate veils from forgotten corners, and the musty scent of the past permeated the air. Amidst the clutter, I embarked on a journey of rediscovery, determined to unveil the secrets concealed within these walls. Day after day, I delved deeper into the house's enigmatic depths, uncovering remnants of Mr. Hawthorne's life scattered like forgotten relics. In the attic, I stumbled upon a trove of yellowed photographs, each capturing a frozen moment in time. There was Mr. Hawthorne as a young man, his eyes sparkling with youthful optimism. In another, he stood proudly beside a blooming rose bush, his frail hands gently cradling a delicate bud. The photographs were like fragments of a shattered mirror, reflecting glimpses of the man who had once called this house home. In the basement, a small, windowless room beckoned me with its air of mystery. Cobwebs adorned the walls, and the floor was carpeted in a thick layer of dust. As I hesitantly stepped inside, a musty odor assailed my senses, and my eyes struggled to adjust to the dimness. Cobwebs clung to my hair and clothes like tenacious spiders, and I fought the urge to retreat to the relative safety of the upper floors. Amidst the shadowy clutter, my gaze fell upon a peculiar object suspended from the rafters. It was a colossal sphere, suspended by a delicate network of threads. Its surface shimmered with an iridescent glow, and I felt an inexplicable sense of trepidation as I cautiously approached. My mind raced, conjuring images of alien pods from forgotten science fiction films. As I drew closer, the realization dawned upon me that it was a wasp nest, the largest I had ever beheld. Its intricate honeycomb structure was a marvel of nature's engineering, but the thought of its former occupants sent shivers down my spine. Adrenaline coursing through my veins, I retreated to the safety of the upper floors, my mind abuzz with questions. How long had the nest been there? Was it still occupied? And if so, what fate awaited me should I disturb its slumbering inhabitants? Nightmares plagued my sleep, visions of wasps swarming around me, their venomous stings piercing my flesh. Fear gnawed at my resolve, threatening to cripple my desire to explore the house's secrets. Days turned into nights as I wrestled with my fears. The wasp nest loomed over me like a menacing specter, its presence casting a shadow over my waking thoughts and haunting my dreams. I knew I could not simply ignore it, but the thought of confronting my terror filled me with a debilitating sense of dread. In moments of weakness, I contemplated abandoning the house altogether, leaving its mysteries forever unsolved. But something within me refused to be vanquished by fear. A flicker of determination ignited within me, a stubborn resolve to face my fears head-on. With trembling hands and a deep breath, I armed myself with a flashlight and a pair of gloves and descended into the shadowy depths of the basement once more. I approached the wasp nest cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. To my astonishment, it was deserted, its former occupants long since departed. Relief washed over me, but my awe at the nest's intricate structure quickly replaced it. The delicate papery exterior was adorned with a mesmerizing marbled pattern, a testament to the wasp's remarkable craftsmanship. I carefully removed a small section of the nest, eager to preserve this vestige of nature's artistry. With newfound reverence, I carried my prize upstairs, where it now occupies a place of honor in my studio. That day, I learned a profound lesson about fear and the power of facing it. The wasp nest had once been a symbol of terror, but now it served as a reminder that even our greatest fears can be overcome with courage and determination. The house continued to yield its secrets to me, bit by bit, as I delved deeper into its enigmatic depths. But the memory of the wasp nest remained, a constant reminder of the transformative power that can lie within even the most daunting of challenges. In the eerie depths of my friend Ethan's basement, shadows danced ominously, casting an unsettling pallor over the musty space. The faint flicker of a lone bulb cast feeble illumination, creating an atmosphere ripe with suspense. As I gingerly descended the creaking wooden stairs, a chill ran down my spine. The air was thick with the scent of decay and long-forgotten dust. My heart pounded in my chest as I reached the bottom, my eyes scanning the murky darkness. Suddenly, a faint rustling sound echoed from the far corner. Curiosity overcame my trepidation, and I cautiously approached the source of the noise. As I drew closer, I noticed a shadowy figure standing motionless amidst the cluttered boxes and discarded furniture. My breath caught in my throat as I realized the figure was wearing an antiquated dress, its fabric faded and torn. A ragged hood concealed its head, leaving only a blank space where a face should have been. A profound sense of unease washed over me, as if I were in the presence of something unknown and malevolent. "Ethan," I whispered, trying to keep the tremor from my voice. "Is that you?" There was no response. The figure remained frozen in its eerie stillness. Panic surged through me as I fumbled for the light switch. With a flick, the basement was suddenly bathed in a harsh glare, revealing a mannequin. Just a mannequin, with its empty eyes and vacant expression. Relief washed over me as I realized the true nature of what I had seen, but a lingering chill remained. "What the hell?" Ethan exclaimed, rushing into the basement from the kitchen. "Did you see that?" "I thought I did," I replied, still shaken. "It looked like some kind of ghost or something." Ethan chuckled. "Come on, man. You're just being spooked by the darkness. It's just a dummy." "I know," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. There was something about that mannequin, something that left me deeply unsettled. We spent the rest of the evening in the basement, trying to convince ourselves that it was just a harmless object. We joked about it, even posed for pictures with the mannequin, but the fear lingered beneath the surface. As the night wore on, we decided to leave the basement and head upstairs. As I made my way up the stairs, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. I turned to look back at the mannequin, and in the flickering light, I thought I saw its empty eyes widen and a faint smile spread across its faceless void. I stumbled back, my heart racing. Ethan caught me before I fell. "What's wrong?" he asked. "I don't know," I gasped. "I think I saw." But before I could finish my sentence, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the basement into impenetrable darkness. Panic surged through me as I heard Ethan's terrified scream. We groped blindly for the light switch, but it was no use. The darkness seemed to suffocate us, feeding our deepest fears. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand brush against my skin. I let out a cry of terror and stumbled backward, crashing into something solid. "Ethan?" I called out, but there was no response. I reached out into the darkness, desperate for something to hold on to. My fingers brushed against a smooth, cold surface. I recoiled in horror as I realized I had touched the mannequin. It was icy to the touch, like something that had long been dead. I felt its vacant eyes boring into my soul, its faceless grin mocking my terror. A wave of nausea washed over me as I fought against the urge to vomit. I stumbled backward, desperate to escape the clutches of the mannequin. I could hear it behind me, its footsteps heavy and measured. I ran blindly through the darkness, my lungs burning, my heart pounding in my chest. I felt the mannequin's hand graze my shoulder, and I let out a strangled cry. Its cold fingers tightened around my arm, dragging me back into the abyss. I fought with all my might, but its grip was relentless. Just when I thought all hope was lost, I heard a faint glimmer of light. I stumbled towards it, my body trembling with exhaustion and fear. As I emerged from the darkness, I realized I was back in the living room. Ethan stood there, his face pale and his eyes wide with terror. He held a flashlight in his trembling hand. It's gone," he whispered. I looked around frantically, but the mannequin was nowhere to be seen. Had it all been a nightmare? Had the darkness played tricks on our minds? We searched the entire basement, but there was no sign of the mannequin. It had vanished without a trace, leaving us with a profound sense of unease. To this day, I am haunted by the events of that night. I cannot shake the feeling that the mannequin was more than just a harmless object. It was a vessel for something dark and malevolent, something that lives in the shadows and feeds on our deepest fears. And I know that somewhere, in the depths of my own heart, a piece of that darkness remains. In the depths of a moonless night, as the party raged above in my friend's apartment, I ventured into the uncharted territory of the basement, a place cloaked in darkness and pregnant with possibilities. My mission was mundane: to replenish the dwindling supply of beer in the fridge, a task that had become increasingly urgent as the revelers' thirst grew more insatiable. The basement stairs creaked beneath my feet like a mournful lament, each step echoing through the silent emptiness. The air was thick with a musty scent that hinted at long-forgotten secrets, and the only illumination came from a single dim bulb that cast an eerie glow upon the dirt-covered floor. As I descended into the darkness, the sound of laughter and music from the party above gradually faded into a faint murmur. The weight of the night began to settle upon my shoulders, and a shiver of unease crept down my spine. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were tracking my every move. I reached the bottom of the stairs and turned towards the fridge, my footsteps disturbing the dust that had been undisturbed for months. As I approached the appliance, I couldn't help but glance over my shoulder towards the far end of the basement where shadows danced and the darkness seemed to writhe. It was then that I detected a faint sound, a soft, almost imperceptible breath that seemed to come from just behind me. I froze in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest like a trapped bird. My mind raced, trying to rationalize the noise away as a draft or my own imagination playing tricks on me. But the sound came again, this time louder and more distinct. It was the unmistakable sound of someone breathing, shallow and labored. I slowly turned around, my senses heightened, my eyes straining to pierce the darkness. And there, in the far corner of the basement, I saw a figure standing motionless, its form shrouded in the shadows. The realization hit me like a bolt of lightning. I was not alone. Fear propelled me forward, my legs carrying me towards the fridge as if they had a mind of their own. I grabbed the beers and turned to flee, but as I did, I caught a glimpse of the figure in the corner moving. It took a step towards me, and the darkness seemed to close in around it, enveloping it like a cloak. I stumbled backwards, desperation fueling my retreat. I fumbled for the light switch, but my fingers trembled, making it impossible to find the button. Darkness suffocated me, amplifying the sound of my own racing heart. Every creak and groan of the old house became a harbinger of danger, each shadow a potential hiding place for the unknown entity lurking behind me. The basement, once a familiar space, had transformed into a labyrinth of terror, its every corner hinting at unspeakable horrors. I finally reached the stairs, my legs burning with exertion. I took 2 steps at a time, my mind screaming for escape. As I burst into the light-filled apartment, I slammed the door behind me, the sound echoing through the hallway like a gunshot. The partygoers stared at me in surprise, their laughter and chatter abruptly silenced. My eyes darted around the room, searching for any sign of the figure from the basement, but it was nowhere to be seen. I tried to tell them what had happened, but my words came out disjointed and incoherent. They looked at me with a mixture of concern and disbelief, unsure of whether to take me seriously. Determined to prove my sanity, I grabbed a flashlight and a group of skeptical friends, and together we ventured back into the basement. But the figure was gone, leaving no trace of its existence. The next morning, I returned to the basement alone, hoping to find some tangible evidence of my encounter. But there was nothing, no footprints, no disturbances in the dust, nothing to suggest that I had not simply imagined the entire experience. The memory of that night still haunts me, a chilling reminder of the unknown horrors that may lurk in the unseen corners of our world. And every time I find myself in a dark and unfamiliar place, I can't help but wonder if I am truly alone or if there is something lurking just behind me, waiting for the right moment to make its presence known.